When it comes to Michael Myers accessories, who's doing it better? Because in this video, as we've already now had a look at the Trick or Treat Studios 1978 accessory pack, an add-on to their previously released Michael Myers, I thought it would be a good follow-up video to actually do a comparison. So on the far left are all the accessories that came included with the Trick or Treat Studios accessory pack, and then to the right are all the accessories that came included with the Sideshow Collectibles Michael Myers. And we're going to compare back and forth, talk about what I like about one and what I like about the other, and along the ways I'm going to kind of tell you what I feel at least to be the better of the accessory of the two that we're going to be comparing. Again, when it comes to the Sideshow Collectibles release, all of the accessories that you're going to be seeing in this video were already packed with the figure. On the other end, Trick or Treat Studios sold their Michael Myers separately and simply gave then collectors the option to buy the accessories afterwards. I am from personally the school of I like the idea of them doing expansion packs so that if you weren't as interested to spend the extra money to get a Michael Myers with all the extra bells and whistles, you could buy yourself the Michael Myers, and then afterwards you could add on and buy the accessory pack. So right off the gate, I think that Trick or Treat Studios, for myself at least, handled things better by adding accessories after the fact. That's just the way I think. Now we're going to have a look at each of the individual accessories. We're going to kind of go apples to apples and oranges to oranges, because in many of the cases you're going to be getting the exact same thing. You're getting Bob's sheet with glasses, you're getting a telephone, a tombstone, and a jack-o'-lantern. What I have left off here are the hands, and also like knives and stuff like that. We're basically just going to be comparing the main things that you would be getting with both the Sideshow release and what you would be getting separately with the Trick or Treat Studios release. Starting things off first, what I wanted to do is compare jack-o'-lanterns. So we're going to grab the one that comes included with the Trick or Treat Studios and reaching as far over as I can get it to grab the one that came included with the Sideshow Collectibles. Now, I don't know if you already can see a considerable difference between the two. This is the one that came with the Trick or Treat Studios release. This is the one that came included with the Sideshow Collectibles release. Already comparing the two, I have to say, but by looking at this one feels almost like more like a cartoon jack-o'-lantern. It's too big, it's too squished, and it certainly looks like the way they've painted it, it looks like something I would expect to see from almost like a Disney cartoon. It's also quite a bit heavier as well than this one here. Where I do think that Sideshow did do a slight better job is the coloring of the pumpkin. I feel like this one could have been afforded a little more orange than what we actually did get. Both of these do also light up as well. For Sideshows, you ended up having to open it up, and inside, there was the battery compartment, heavily caked in glue. I might have even mentioned at the time that I did the review of it. But you can turn this on, and this is magnet, by the way, so you just attach the two back together. And already, you can see it doesn't flicker. It stays just as a steady light. And I didn't like the idea that you could see the light sticking, well, straight through his nose, whereas not having the light up further up here. I'm going to turn on the one that comes included with Trick or Treat Studios. No involved having to separate the two halves as the battery compartment was on the back. And you turn that on. As I'm holding the two already in hand, can you see a considerable difference between the two? Not only that, too, but this pumpkin I feel is of the proper size. If it scales well. Maybe it could even have just afforded to be a little bit bigger, but I think it's at least of the right size. This is, again, way too oblong. It's just not right. It's not the right shape at all. It looks like the pumpkin has started to degrade and become moldy. Kind of like when you leave a pumpkin outside long after Halloween and you refuse to put it away, and it sort of starts sinking, and then when you pick it up, it's just a pile of mush. But yeah, this one does flicker. It looks like a candle, doesn't it, inside? And being the fact as well that the light source is up at the top here, it illuminates all of the internal cavity of the pumpkin, and it flickers like it would flicker with a natural pumpkin. With this one being the light source right in the middle of its nose, not only is it an eyesore, but the fact that it doesn't flicker, it just ruins the effect of it looking like a candle. If this was also further up, like they've done in this case, it would have been able to illuminate all of the pumpkin. Whereas this case, unfortunately with Sideshow's release, it's only illuminating this middle area with the nose. So I think of the two pumpkins, I would award the winner in this case to Trick or Treat Studios. On to now then the tombstones of the late Judith Myers. With Trick or Treat Studios release, first of all, it was a lot bigger of a tombstone, and unfortunately because of that as well, it was more prone to falling over. Picking up then the two tombstones, I'm going to pick up the one that comes included from Trick or Treat Studios, and again, Why did I have to have things so far away? I'm going to grab the ones that come included with Sideshow. First of all, I'm going to talk about the positive points of Sideshows. Sideshows is thicker when you see the two. Not by much, though. It is also a little more smaller in size, which is really a negative point about it. It does have, I find like the lettering is etched in a lot more successful, at least, on the Sideshow release. It's not carved in nearly as much when it comes to the Trick or Treat Studios release. Coloring-wise, I would say I would give it to Trick or Treat Studios. I like more the darker gray than I like the lighter coloring of stone that they've used. It's also not the right size either. When you look at Sideshow Collectibles and you go back and you see the scene where Annie is laying in the bed, Annie's head is going to be right in the middle of the tombstone. I would just be fearful that the tombstone, well, she's already dead, I suppose, anyways. But her head is like right in the middle, and like the tombstone almost seems to be another head on either side of her. If you then factor that in, I feel like this tombstone, first of all, is way too short, and it's not nearly wide enough. Both of them do have the born date of November 10th, 1947. Both of them do have the deceased date of October 31st, 1963, and both of them do still feature our beloved daughter, Judith Myers. Although, again, I think I like the more painted-in way that they've filled in the lettering on this one, whereas this one they've actually just sort of airbrushed across all of them. So I will say, like, the way that they've carved this in looks a lot nicer, but I think most of the points I would certainly award it, I think, to Trick or Treat's Studios. Even though theirs have a little more difficult time standing, it just seems to be more so the fact that it's a much longer looking tombstone that I find it just has some stability issues. Still wish that they could have actually included some sort of bottom, like little standee or something that would allow then the tombstone not to fall over. One thing I did also want to mention as well in both the cases, at the very top of the tombstone, they have this little scroll work, this little decorative flower that's on both the corners, and it's on the case on both of them. Sideshow is a little more detailed. You can kind of make out more of what's going on here. See where you can see the individual flowers. And this one, they sort of just given you the suggestion of what it would look like, sort of outlining the look of the flowers. But I think in both the cases, going back to the original source material, neither of them is actually correct. I believe in the movie, there is a flower further up here on either side, which would be, again, replicated on both the tombstones. But I think just below that, it would actually be little stems of the flowers that sort of curled. In both the cases, what they've actually done instead is they've put two flowers on both the sides. So even though, like, the scroll work, the additional flower deco that they've added to the top corner really isn't correct in either of the case, I would still give it, I think, to Trick or Treat Studios for giving us a more sized appropriately tombstone. Color-wise, I think it's a lot better. And I think it's just, for the coloring and the shape of it, I would definitely say like Trick or Treat Studios gave us the better looking tombstone. Although, side notes, side points, I would certainly award for having a more etched in lettering on Sideshow's release instead. When it comes to making phone calls, you might have better luck actually using the one that comes included with Trick or Treat Studios, as you actually get yourself a full phone. The one that came included with Sideshows was actually just the receiver attached to the cord. Now, the thing about the cord just being dangling like this, it actually works better just to having Michael Myers holding it in his hand, where you don't have the weight and the worry of the phone attached to the other side. With these cords as well, you can stretch them, so there's a little bit more of allotted space. You could technically do that also with Trick or Treat Studios, so it's more preference than anything else. Do you enjoy actually having your receiver attached to a phone? If that's the case, Trick or Treat Studios knocks this one out of the park by giving you actually a full phone. Sideshow Collectibles only gave you just the receiver. Coloring-wise, I think as well, Trick or Treat Studios gave you a more accurate color, as it was more of a lighter beige and not quite the more dingier greenish beige that we actually get here, the standalone receiver. Now with Trick or Treat Studios, you could still stretch the cord, something that several of you viewers actually did mention as well, because I did say I don't really like the idea of actually having the phone dangling like this, and many of you did pipe up and say, yeah, you can actually stretch the cord, which you can. And that's one thing that you can also do as well. You can have Michael Myers sort of holding the one side of the phone in his one hand, and then you can have him holding the receiver then in the other hand. I think, again, for me, getting the camera here just to focus in on this, I think for me, I just love the idea that we actually get ourselves a full phone. Even in the review of when we looked at the accessory pack, I had mentioned that it would have also been nice that they could have included just the receiver and cord so that you had two different options available. But how do you beat actually a rotary phone that really does rotate? Again, it's more for me preference-wise. I like more so the idea that we got ourselves actually in a full working phone, well, somewhat working phone, over Sideshow Collectibles release, which basically just gave you the receiver and the cord standalone. Moving then on to Bob's glasses. The one I'm currently tapping on the top here is the one that came included with the Trick or Treat Studios release, and the one down below here is the one that came included with the Sideshow Collectibles release. Frame-wise, I have to give this actually to Sideshow Collectibles. I think they gave us what looks to be more realistic looking glasses, especially the way that they've molded the side here. I believe also in the movie, Bob's frames are more of a darker brown. It's less more the coloring of this red with the little dashes of black. It could also be just the way it's lit as well, but they definitely do seem a little more darker brown in the movie. I think the shape of the frame right around the lens looks a little bit more accurate as well, whereas Bob's frames were more rounded down below. The one that came released here with the Trick or Treat Studios release was actually more square shape. For me, I think I would actually give this award, even though it's just small as a standalone accessory that's going to go along with the sheet, but I actually do think that Sideshow Collectibles handled their glasses a little bit better than the ones we got included with Trick or Treat Studios. Now comes the biggest debate in all of this. Who handled Bob's sheets better? Who handled Bob's sheet better? Trick or Treat Studios or Sideshow Collectibles? Now, the companies did take the approach to Bob's sheet completely different from one another. Sideshow Collectibles was actually a separate sheet piece that went over top of an interchangeable head, whereas Trick or Treat Studios actually glued the head to the sheet. Now, for the purpose of the comparison here, I haven't altered Bob's sheet at all since the last time that we've looked at it in its standalone review. After this video, I'm going to actually go in there and see if I can heat up the sheet and slightly remove some of the glue from the front of Bob's sheet's alternate head sculpt for the Trick or Treat Studios release. I'm going to see if I can actually fix the Bob sheet, but I didn't want to alter anything in this video so that you guys could see out of the box exactly what it looks like. We're going to go ahead and grab, first of all, Sideshow Collectibles. And so I have to make sure I hold on to everything while I'm doing it, because Sideshow Collectibles was literally just a sheet of material. I'm just going to open it up completely so you can see. There's Bob's eyes right in the middle there, or at least what Michael Myers would be looking straight through. The sheet itself was pretty it had some elasticity to it. And sort of looked like a balloon. I don't know why. Maybe I may have said that even when we looked at the review of it. But the material sort of has like almost a bit of an artificial look to it. It's really strange to describe it. But underneath all of this, Sideshow Collectibles would have just given us a generic head sculpt. The positive points, at least of the head being generic like this, not sculpting the hair on top, is I felt like the sheet sat more flush onto his head. Trick or Treat Studios, actually using a Michael Myers head sculpt already, had the higher hair, which meant that the actual sheet was going to lift further up Bob's sheet. So you sort of really want to have it as close to the head as possible. For that reason, I might almost even say that Sideshow Collectibles handled it better by giving us just a stock head, because of course the hair would be pressed down in the movie. You can't replicate that by pressing down on plastic molded hair. So for that reason, I think like the sheet sits better, even though it doesn't really sit all that well because there's nothing really attaching it to the head. If we take the Bob sheet, I'm going to go ahead now and just kind of open things up here. I'm doing my best to kind of fit. Oh, by the way, as one other thing that they've also included as well, there's like a little notch in between the eyes here that once you've have finished draping the sheet over top of Bob's head underneath, or so we are to assume that that's Bob's head. You're then supposed to take his glasses. So like right now, I've kind of got everything lined up as best as I can get it. Bob's glasses did have a peg on it. And sort of you just had to line up and guess more so where that slot would be actually. And you kind of have to feel around sort of like right there and just sort of line everything up and press it in place. It's pretty difficult to actually do because you think you may have an idea where it actually is. It may involve you having to lift it up for a second. Anyway, it's right there in between the eyes. Just drop the sheet back down here for a second. Let's first of all find where those eyes are. Yeah, you can already see one problem that you're going to be dealing with here. Because they haven't glued the sheet at all to the face, it's a guessing game more than anything else just to get the sheet properly lined up and around his face. 10 minutes later, this is what you succeed in doing. At least it took me 10 minutes to finally get the glasses to be plugged in place. The glasses do most of all the work to really keep the sheet in place. And then you have to kind of go in there and just sort of move the eyes around. As I'm holding everything at bay, I'm going to also bring it back a little bit so you can see. Yeah, it does have more of a natural drape to it. I did maybe say in the review of it that I wish they could have put an adhesive or something onto the top, so at least they kept everything in place, so then you only had to then put the glasses on. But you know, the more time I'm spending looking at this, I have to say, at least to the credit of Sideshow Collectibles, Bob sheet drapes actually more naturally, because of course nothing is glued to the face itself. And then from there, of course, we're going to go ahead and attach that to Michael Myers' head. I'll do that in a second, actually, but what I'll do in the meantime is I'm going to kind of just hold this as best I can get it. And I'm going to grab the one that came included with Trick or Treat Studios. Now, to be fair, Trick or Treat Studios did acknowledge the fact that they did make the mistake of gluing the entire face, or the entire sheet, to the face that was underneath. And what they've actually done in this case is, unlike using a stock head that Sideshow released actually did, what they've actually done instead, if I can lift the sheet back while holding Bob's sheet here, they have actually used a stock Michael Myers 78 head. Sure, yes, they've shaved it down a bit so that the sheet sits a little lower on the head, but I actually think by just removing the hair altogether, you get the sheet draping more naturally the way it would have looked in the movie. And again, comparing the two, it's a little harder really to do the comparison because one is literally just conforming to the shape of the Michael Myers head underneath, while the other one is just like a sheet draping over top of a head. The glasses, of course, for this one were a little more difficult also to put in place. I'm just going to put the one that came with Sideshow down for a second. Taking the glasses that came included with Trick or Treat really involved you having really just to rest it onto the head. First of all, like the eyes were stretched out of shape because they would have then taken the glue, slapped it onto the head, and then just sort of stretched the material over top of it. I actually think I like this material a little bit more than the one that came included, because if you look at the coloring of it, I've just now lost the head. I'm going to have to change that in a second. Just looking at the two heads, or at least the two sheets, I think I might actually like the material a little bit more on Trick or Treat Studios release than I do the Sideshow. Sideshow's is white, to be fair, like a sheet. But I think like you need almost more of a thickness to the sheet so it's got some weight when it drapes down. Like see the way it folds, kind of folds over itself? Imagining, if you will, as well, that this is just naturally draping over the head. I think it would fall a lot nicer on the figure. Because they've also put, in this case, a wire frame at the bottom of it, it does sort of distort the sheet. I've almost even considered the idea of trying to remove the wire frame. But I think a lot of it can really be rectified once I've gotten in there, taken a hairdryer, or even submerging this possibly even in hot water to try to soften up that glue. Once I've stretched this off, once I've removed this completely, and I can actually get in there and start manipulating it, I think actually the material is nicer on this one. This drapes a lot better on the head, but I think the sheet material that they used here, being that it's a lot more weighted, it still has elasticity to it, by the way, but the way it drapes, I think, a lot more. I think it gives you sort of those better shadowed areas like it would have had in the movie. I don't like this, but I do like the material at least that Trick or Treat decided to use when it came to Bob's sheet here. And of course, if we are going to be looking at Bob's sheet after all, you guys will want to see what it looks like on the actual 6-scale figures. So once again, to the left is the TOTS 78 Michael Myers with now the swapped out head sculpt that has the glued on sheet. To the right is the Sideshow Collectibles Michael Myers with the interchangeable head put on, but the sheet just draped over top of it. And you can already see, naturally draping is the sheet that's on the Sideshow release because it's literally just a piece of fabric sitting over top of a head, and really only just Bob's glasses, the peg that are in between the lenses. That's the thing that's really keeping the sheet at place. Now still, they could have glued the top of it so you didn't have to spend so much time trying to line up the eye holes to the actual eyes of the head that's underneath before you actually have to plug in the glasses. I wish that they could have still adhered somehow the sheet to the top of the head so you didn't have to worry about trying to move it around and line up everything accordingly. But I will say, though, to the point of Sideshow's release, it does drape more naturally on the head, and being as well that they didn't use this a stock 78 head underneath, I think just using the more smoother head, you get a much more realistic looking Bob sheet. It also is the proper length, too. It drapes onto the floor the way it should, like it did in the movie. Comparing that to, of course, TOTS, acknowledging again the fact that they should have never really adhered the sheet to the whole front of the face, and also acknowledging the fact that I haven't altered these in any way, shape, or form. I did really want to leave them as naturally the way that you get them out of the packaging so that you could really see a true difference between the two. After this video is shot, I'm going to heat up the face and see if I can pry away the sheet material that was attached to the face, because first of all, it lifts the sheet too far up from the legs. The sheets should naturally drape onto the floor. And even though I'm still not sure I like the idea of them putting a wire frame all along the bottom trim of the sheet, maybe it probably would work better once I've allotted a little more length, removing some of that sheet material from the face. Bob's Glasses, I would say, has handled better on the Sideshow release because you don't have to worry about balancing it onto the ears and the nose and the bridge of the nose. You're literally just taking a peg and plugging it into the hole of the face that's underneath, so everything stays in place. TOTS, unfortunately, you had to balance the glasses on top of the bridge and the tops of the ears, and I spent a lot of time. I've spent, considering between this and the actual accessories review, I spent a lot of time just trying to get the glasses to balance properly on the face. I wish that they could have maybe followed the same suit, either putting plugs or pegs on the sides of the glass frame so you could plug them into the side of the head, or done the same idea of what Sideshow would have done, put that peg right in the middle of the frames so you can actually have just plugged it into the face that's underneath. Positive points, though, for TOTS is the material that they used for the sheet. And again, I haven't altered this in any way. I guess I could have gone in there and ironed things, but I did want to leave it completely as is so that you guys can see. Even though the length of the material is better on the Sideshow release, I do think like the material is more wrinkle prone. Again, you can kind of go in there and fix it, but I think I like the more solid color. It feels like the top material, it doesn't look as translucent. It's kind of strange to say that because neither one of the sheets are actually ones that, I guess if you ran a light source between it, the TOTS one would have less of the light showing through it. It seems to be a more denser material. I find it has more weight to it. And I think once I did fix the problems that had plagued the face, I feel like the sheet material that TOTS used would drape better than the one that we get with the Sideshow Collectibles. I think the Sideshow Collectibles maybe is too thin of a material and definitely more prone to wrinkling. What do you guys think, though? Certainly weigh in your thoughts down below. Do you agree or disagree with any of the points that I mentioned certainly in this video? Also, let me know down below in the comments section how you would break down rating each of the individual accessories. Again, one company did things a little bit better than the others. I think overall, Trick or Treat Studios handled the accessories better than what we got with the Sideshow Collectibles. There's still, of course, little staggering points like the Bob sheet. I thought as a whole handled better with the Sideshow release. But let me know down below in the comments section, which accessories do you think the company handled better? Which one, for example, did Sideshow handle better than Trick or Treat Studios, and vice versa? I always like reading your comments down below. And hey, now, if you are new to this channel, you're enjoying the content that you're seeing, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below. Turn on the bell notification. And yes, make sure you keep your peepers peeled while we have wrapped up things in this comparison video. Maybe down the road, we may also do other comparisons of other company products back to back. What other things would you guys like to see compared here on this channel? Certainly weigh in your thoughts down below in the comment section. As always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.